Good morning, everyone. My name is Yumiko, one of the pastors here. And this is a time that one of the preaching team usually bring God's message to you all. But for the summer, we've been doing something a little bit different. Once in a while, we have one of the Wellspring ʻOhana member come up here and share their life story. We begin with Karen Iha, and we had John Motohiro the other day. And today we're going to welcome John Fukumae soon. But and then we're going to have a few more coming up. So life story that we're going to do today, John's going to come up, and what the life story is they're going to share what God has done in their life and through their life. So they'll be talking a lot about their life, but essentially the prayer that John asked us to pray for, and every life story preparer pray for, is that God's story be told through their life. So today we get to hear from John, and he's going to share a little bit about his life, and we get to hear who God has been in his life. So welcome, John.
Thank you. This has been a whirlwind of a year for me. A year ago, I was diagnosed with stage 3 prostate cancer. And I prayed that God would deliver me from this disease, but He elected to have me go through this treatment and all the testing that I had to undergo all year round. At the same time, I started my medication treatment. My mom took a turn for the worse. She fell down 3 times in 24 hours, and my brother would call me because he cannot lift him up because he has kidney failure and stroke victim. So he calls me, and I had to go pick her up 3 times in one day. And finally, the 4th time she fell down, we sent her directly to the hospital, and she just couldn't work. She couldn't walk anymore because her advanced age she was 95, almost 96. And she ended up going directly to a hospice. And she stayed at the hospice for about 3.5 months, and she passed away in the end of May. 2 days before my mom passed away, my younger brother, he suffered a series of strokes, and he couldn't get out of bed. So we had to take him to the hospital, and he was sent directly to a care home. So he's still there in a care home, as he cannot even sit up from bed and cannot walk. And he is currently still there, unable to move, and he has to be bathed and fed. And so all this is going on while I have this treatments that are still ongoing. Well, I stopped my radiation treatment a couple months ago, but my medication is still continuing till the end of this month. But during this time, I had this peace that I can only describe as God. He prepared me for this season, I know. All from the beginning, the journey that I'm going to take you to when I first started this journey with God. So, but now He prepared me for this season so that I had this peace, that I was not afraid. I went through my treatments, and it's a blessing, and I have this thankfulness for the church body, all you guys, and my friends that supported me. And I found this newfound appreciation when people would pray for me. That really meant a lot to me. Before, when I was healthy, I would pray for other people. And now that the tables are turned and I needed this prayer, when people would pray for me, it really touched me. And I appreciated guys like Neil that would come and hug me and pray for me. Rico would do the same. Kimi, I had support. People would come up and pray for me here and there. And I want to tell you this neat story. When I was getting my MRI done. I had an afternoon MRI scheduled, and I went to Down to Earth to pick up my lunch. And there I saw, on the same day I was supposed to have my MRI, I ran into Debbie. And she said that was the first time she went to that Down to Earth. And so I shared that I'm having an MRI that day, and Debbie prayed for me in the store. And that was really comforting, because I know, well, I had other surgeries before, like I had a sinus surgery years ago. And the day that I went in for sinus surgery, when I walked in the hospital, I met, just after I met a person from the worship team I was on, and she prayed for me. So that was like a sign that God gave me comfort to meet these people on the day of a procedure, and it gave me comfort and to know that I have all this support and love behind me. So I appreciate my appreciation and thankfulness is what I've learned over the years. Philippians 2:13 says that for it is God who works in you to will and to act according to His good purpose. So have you ever wondered what God's will is for you in your life? Sometimes you get an urge, or sometimes you get a thought, or a situation happens. You wonder, is this truly from God, or is it something else? So I'm here to share what God has done for me and continues to do for me. What I've learned over the years was that if I know God, I can better connect with His will. And so I developed a close relationship with God through prayer. And I don't mean just the formal prayers, but just throughout the day, I would constantly, in my mind, talk to God. Out of frustration, sometimes anger, and a lot of times in thankfulness, but just this constant communication with God throughout the day, just between Him and me. I developed this close relationship with Him. And the other thing was having faith, this confident trust or relying trust in God, that what He has in store for me is all good. And so the journey began before I became a Christian. I want to say that His plan was to take care of my basic needs before He would send me into other ministries, so that, if He took care of my basic needs first, it'll free up time for me to do future ministry and works. So the first thing He did was to find me a lifelong partner. And you'll see that God used unorthodox ways in all these stories I'm going to share to get my attention and get me going. So my lifelong partner, Danette, it started, God knew that I'm not the type of person to chase after women. So He had Danette, my future wife, chase after me. And this is the story. We both were at UH. This is 1977, and we both needed a a language class for our degree. And so we both decided to take first year Japanese language. And it was by the time we both registered, all the morning classes were taken. So the only one that was left was 2:30 to 3:30. And it met Monday through Friday, so 5 days a week. And we both didn't want an afternoon class because, I had all my other classes in the morning, and every day I would have to stay till 3:30 and like a whole day on campus. So I didn't want it, but we had no choice. All the other classes were filled. So God got us together in that class, but still nothing happened. She was sitting on one end of the wall with all the smart people. And I was on the other end of the wall with all the not so smart people. I remember Sensei would come up to me and say, "Fukumae, what's the answer?" And I would go, And I see Danette from the other side, other wall, she's going like this. I know. So we still weren't going to get together. So God had to step up his efforts. So there was one day where the sensei was late, and we had time to talk. So we knew each other from class only by our last names, Fukumae-san, Lao-san, and we were talking and sharing like, hey, what's your first name? So we got to know people around us, their first name. And I remember Danette said, oh, my name is Danette. And I said, I knew her as Lao-san. I said, Danette Lao? She goes, yes. I said, I have a first cousin named Danette Lao. And she goes, oh, what's her father's name? And I said, my uncle's name is Daniel Lao. And she said, my father's name is Daniel Lao. And then she says, I have a brother named Stephen Lao. And I said, I have a first cousin named Stephen Lao. And she goes, oh, I have a first cousin named Donna May Lao. And I said, I have a first cousin named Donna May Lao. And everybody in the class was just looking at us like, you know, and you guys are related or what? But we're not related. So that perked my interest a little bit. I went home, I remember I shared with my mom. I said, hey, Mom, I met somebody in my class that has the same name as Danette, you know, my cousin. So that was interesting. But we still didn't really talk and stuff until God did this next move. We both were usually on time in class, and when you're in class, you tend to sit in the same seats. So I was on one wall, she was on the other wall. God made it so that both of us were late for that same class on the same day. And just so happens on that day, other people took our seats. So when we both walked in late, our seats were taken. So the only two seats that were left was two right in the front, in the middle, in front of the teacher. And so I sat down on one side, Danette sat down on the other side. And so we're close together. The sensei was talking, and it was about a couple minutes before class would end. And from the side of my eye, I could see Danette reach into her purse to take out a quarter, because she used to catch bus home after that class. So she took out a quarter, and what God would have it was he made her fumble that quarter. And that quarter fell on the floor right by my foot. And so I put my foot over the quarter, and I just kept staring at the teacher. And I could see from the side of my eye that she's looking at me, trying to get my attention. And I'm just ignoring her. And she couldn't say anything because the teacher's right there in front talking. And she's trying to get my attention. And so when finally the teacher says, class dismissed, what I did was I reached down, I grabbed the quarter, and I grabbed my books, and I made it out the door. And I don't know, I just felt kalohe that day. And then I normally won't do this, but so she chased after me. And she ran down the hall and said, hey, you come back here, that's my quarter. And I just ignored her, and I ran down the hall and down the stairs and out into the courtyard. And she ran after me, chasing me. And finally she caught up to me and said, excuse me, that's my quarter. And I said, oh, this? Oh, sorry. And I gave it back to her. And so that was our connection. So we started talking, and she says, oh, I'm going to catch bus clear across campus. We were more like on East-West Road at UH, and we both had to, her bus was at the bus stop was at University Avenue. We're on the other side of campus. And just so happens, I parked my car at a friend's house near the bus stop. So I was going in the same direction. So we walked together and got to know each other a little better. And, you know, it's funny that God knew that this pretty Chinese girl would chase after me for a quarter. Because I don't think anybody else would. So the rest is history. We've been, I've known her for 47 years, and we're going to celebrate our 41st wedding anniversary next Monday. So I know it's from God, because these things last long. So the next step was for God to take care of my finances, to get me a job. So he knew also that I'm not the type that would pound the pavement and submit my resume to all these different corporations. I had no ambition. I just was working in a small company. And during my break, I was walking in the lobby of this building, Grosvenor Center, downtown. And I heard my name, John. And I looked, and it was someone I haven't seen in a long time. And just so happens, he was the brother of the mechanic that used to work on my hot rods when I was younger. And he said, John, I work for an insurance company, and just so happens they're looking for claims adjuster trainees. No experience necessary. Come up and apply. And I said, well, I don't know. I don't know anything about insurance. And he says, you don't have to worry. They'll train you. They'll give you books, and they'll train you you don't have to know anything. And I said, well, I don't know. And he goes, look, he says, here's the starting salary. And when I heard it, I go, oh, okay. Compared to what I was making. And he said, oh, and everybody, you get to choose a brand new car as a company car. You can use it 24/7, and they'll pay for all the gas, all the insurance, all the maintenance, and they'll pay for your parking in the building. So I thought, wow, that's a good benefit. So I went up and applied, and as God would have it, even with my bad grades, I got accepted. And I started working there. And God wanted me in that company because of what's going to take place next. But I know that company was from God too, because I've worked there for 43 years until I retired 2 years ago. So it was a job that God gave me, and it gave me finances to buy a house and take care of. I didn't have to worry about the financial situation in my life. So God now wanted me to hook up with somebody who would witness to me. And it just so happens, there was 2 trainees they hired, me and Brian. And we both were the same age. We both were stuck in the same room studying together. And we really hit it off. And we would eat lunch together every day and cruise on the weekends. Our company cars, we both decided to choose a Ford Mustang. Same color, same year, as a brand new Mustang. That's how I got interested in Mustangs. So my first company car was a Mustang, and we would cruise around the island. And so we came real close and did a lot of things together. So 3 years passed. Now God says, I'm going to convert you guys to be believers. So what happened was, my friend Brian met his future wife, who was already a Christian, and she witnessed to him. And then he, in turn, witnessed to me at work. So I remember him going after me and said, John, you gotta accept Jesus as Lord and Savior. And I said, nah, I don't think so. And he said, but he never gave up. He kept hounding me. And every day, and I said, but because I knew his heart, and I saw the change in his life, that I knew that this was something special. And so finally I said, okay, I'll accept Jesus as Lord and Savior. So we said the prayer in the office, and I became a Christian. So it's through the job, I met somebody, now I'm a Christian, and now Brian says, you got to hook up with a Bible teaching church. So he lived in Ka'aba, and I lived in Waipio Gentry at the time, so I didn't want to go to his church far away. So he said, you know of any Bible teaching church near Waipio Gentry? And I go, no. And so we prayed about it. I remember praying in the office, and as God would have it, that same day when I went home, I opened my mailbox. There was a flyer from a non-denominational Bible teaching church that says, we teach the Bible verse by verse and ask the question, so what? How does this apply to me? So it's a good application church. And I thought, wow, God works fast. Right away, there's a church and it's nearby. It's in Mililani. So I brought it the next day, the flyer, to work. I showed Brian, and he looked at it. He said, yeah, that seems like a good church to get connected with. So he says, but one thing, I want to take the flyer and show another Christian friend of his just to double check, just a second opinion. So I said, fine. So before I gave him the flyer, I wrote down on a piece of paper the address that was on the flyer. And then I gave it to him. And then the weekend came and I didn't get the flyer back. And I decided, well, I'm going to go ahead and go to this church. So I woke up this Sunday morning and I told Danette, we were married at the time, and I said, well, I'm going to go to check out this church. You want to go? And she goes, no. So I went by myself. And so I drove to Mililani, and it was Sunday morning, and it was a quiet residential neighborhood. There was no church building around, no building around, all houses, no people walking around. It was Sunday morning, real quiet, and I go, man, did I copy the wrong address now? And so I double-checked the address. It was the same one. It was correct. And so I said, well, okay. I got out of my car. I went to the front door, and I rang the doorbell, and nobody answered. Nobody was home. So I remember going back to my car, and I sat down in the car by myself, and I prayed out, oh, God, in frustration. I know you wanted me to go to this church, how events unfolded, and I'm making a good faith effort to go, but there's no church here. And right then and there, God impressed on me the map that was on the flyer. Now, I didn't have the flyer with me, but I remember the vision of the map came into my mind, and I remembered, oh yeah, I have to go on Kamehameha Highway, go toward Wahiawa. The road goes down in a valley, and before it goes up again, there's a traffic light, and you make a right turn, and the church should be there. And it's all that's in my mind. I go, okay. So I said, thank you, Lord. And I started the car. I went to Kamehameha Highway. I drove. Sure enough, went down the hill. There's a traffic light. I turned right, and there was a ballpark on one side and apartment buildings on the other side. And I could see, it was a short road in. I could see a gate at the end because there was a gated community past there. And I go, there's still no church. And I thought, oh, no, I drove all the way to the end. And sure enough, right before that gate, on my right side, there was a sign, Pacific Island Bible Church, which is the church that was on the flyer. So I had found the church. By the way, there's a nursery right next door to the church that I later found out was owned by Horace and Doris Sukita from this church. And they knew the pastors there too. So I attended the church. I walked in, and they accepted me. And it was great. From there, I spent 10 years learning a lot about God. And the pastor took interest in me. He took me under his wing and went one-on-one with me through a one-year discipleship class, just him and me. He would drive his car to downtown, pick me up at Pacific Guardian Center in downtown, and he would bring two beach chairs, and we go to Ala Moana Beach Park and sit down and go spend an hour going through these lessons once a week. And at the end, he said, at the end of this 1 year, I want you to memorize 104 verses. I go, 104 verses? He said, yep, you can do it. So I said, okay. So I tried, and he would drill me, he would test me every time. Well, I get 1, 2, 3. I got to 25, and then afterwards, 26 was really hard. I said, I'm burnt out. I can't memorize anything more. And he said, okay, just forget about the 100. Just focus on 30. Get 30, and that'll separate the men from the boys. So I said, okay. So when I hit 30, he said, great, good job. Now focus on 50. If you get 50, that really separates the men from the boys. So I said, okay. So I got to 50, and by the time I got momentum, from 50 to 104 was really easy. So I got to 104, and that was a accomplishment for me because I don't have a good photographic memory. I had to do things the hard way, just by repetition. And of course, God, that's part of God's will too, for me to memorize His word, and for you too. You don't have to ask if it's God's will for me to memorize His word. Of course, He wants us to memorize His word. And so by doing that, I hid God's word in my heart, so that when these situations would come up in the future, I had His word with me. And so the next thing that happened was I joined the worship team. And how it happened was an interesting story too. We're the first church, and we had a Bible study at our house, and then we had a lunch, and then during the lunch, the pastor's son, which was the associate pastor at the time, and he was the piano player on the worship team. And so I said, Scott, come over. I had a piano in the other room, and I sat down and said, I want you to listen to something. And I sat down and I played all the songs he played the previous Sunday, the worship song. And he looked at me and he goes, okay, interesting. And I thought, okay. And so I just wanted to show him. And then that night he calls me and he said that God had put on his heart to start a church on the mainland and be a head pastor. And he was mulling it over, shall I go or not? And he says, when I heard you play the piano, God spoke to me and says, go. And so he says, John, I decided to step down from the church, go to the mainland and start up a new church. And I want you to take my place on the worship team on the piano. And I said, oh. And by the time I knew it was God's calling, because so it's not from any of my abilities or anything, but he wanted me in this ministry. So he took me under his wing for a little while, for a few weeks before he left, and taught me some pointers on the piano. And from there, I've been on the worship team now for 37 straight years. This is my fourth church here. So we moved, and from Waipio to Pro City, and we decided to fellowship in other churches. And so I remember telling God, every time I went to a new church and I didn't know anybody there, I said, I'm not going to ask anybody if I could join the worship team. If you want me to be on the worship team, you're going to have them ask me. And that was my small test. And sure enough, the second church, I went in and I got a call from somebody on the worship team that says, yeah, I recognize you. You played keyboards at the Walk for Jesus concert. I said, oh yeah, that was me. The first church, there was a band that was formed outside of church called Sila, and we would play outside in Halawa Prison and Waikiki Beach. And one year we played at the Ilikai Hotel at the Walk for Jesus rally, and they just happened to recognize me, and they said, John, we've been praying all this time for keyboardists, and would you like to join? And I knew it was from God because I had told God before, I prayed to God that if they asked me, I would say yes. And sure enough, they asked me. So I said, okay, yes. And I joined the worship team and until I left. And I went to another church in Kaneohe, a big church that had 6 services and a lot of bands. And same thing. I said, God, if you want me on the worship team, you have them ask me. And we had a Bible study at our house again, and just so happens one of the people there was the secretary of the head pastor, and she heard me play piano because we were playing worship songs before our studies, and I guess she talked to the pastor talked to the worship director. And I got a call that week saying, hey, I understand you play keyboards. I said, yeah, I do. He says, why don't you come out and audition? So I said, okay. He said, we're going to have an audition this weekend. Just come out and we'll see what happens. I said, fine, I'll go. So I went, and 30 people showed up for the audition. Most of them were singers, and there was some guitar players. 3 of us showed up for piano. And it was an elderly lady. She sat down, she played. Then there was a younger teenager that played. And then I went up, and they said, sit down the piano and play anything. So I decided to play Give Thanks. So I played Give Thanks, and then right when I finished, they said, okay, you got it. So I got the position, and they put me on the main worship, the main service, which was Sunday 9:30. And I was there 11 years, so I've been on the worship team 11 years there. When I came to this church, same thing. I decided, I said, God, if you want me to be on a worship team again, I won't say anything. You have somebody asked me, and I remember the first day I visited, I wasn't even a member yet. I just visited first day, and the bass player of the band came up to me and said, "Hey, I recognize you. You know, you play keyboards." I said, "How do you know?" Because I didn't know who this person was. And the person said, "Word gets around." I thought, I don't know. And so I didn't give any commitment yet because I didn't know if I was going to stay here or not. But we decided to stay here. And several months passed, and sure enough, I would just be sitting down, and during the break or something, Donna came up and asked me if I wanted to join the worship team. And I knew it was from God. So I said, "Okay, yes, I'll do it." So here I am. Yeah. Another thing that God wanted me to go into was to teach Sunday school. And what happened was, I would be in the Sunday school class, and the teacher, one day, he was talking about salvation, and he said, "We are not saved until we pass away, until we die, and then we are saved to go to heaven." And I said, "No, that doesn't sound right. If I'm alive and I accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior, I'm saved." And he goes, "No, you have to work out your salvation when you're alive, and then when you die, that's when you're saved." And I said, "No." So we were going back and forth, and it got kind of heated. And, it carried on till the end of the class. And I remember God, he did another miracle. There was Sunday school class, and then it was followed by service. So just happens the first song we were singing was a hymnal from the Baptist church, and it was "Saved, Saved, Saved." That's the title of the song. And we're singing, and we're singing a song, and then I look at the teacher, and he's sitting over there, and I go, and he goes, "Get out of here." And so, that night he calls me again, and we were going back and forth about he still wouldn't change his position, and I wouldn't either. But we agreed to be cordial, respect each other, and still respect each other. So we ended on a good note. The following Sunday, I thought, okay, here we go again. So following Sunday, I go to Sunday school. He pulls me aside, and he says, "John, God impressed on my heart to step down, and I want you to take my place." And I go, "Oh." So for some reason, what happened was during that week, he got orders. He was a military officer, and he got orders to reassign to the mainland in the next month or so. So he decided he wanted to step down and have me take his place. And that's how he became a Sunday school teacher. And these unorthodox ways that I got these things, but I know it's from God. And I know it was from God too, because I would pray, "God, when I teach people, my students, I want to make sure that I'm correct. I don't want to teach them anything false, because I'll be held accountable to you. So please, if I'm thinking something wrong, tell me." And so it was a pretty successful time with the Sunday school for maybe about 7 years. It was a Sunday school for adults that I inherited his class had about 8 of us at the time, and it grew to 24 within a year. So because it grew, I knew something was working, is God doing all the work for me. So that ministry was deep. Okay, raising. We had a family. We decided to have children, and we prayed to God. I asked Danette. I said, "Oh, when we were young, did your parents ever tell you they loved you or hugged you?" And she goes, "No." And I said, "Me too. My mom or dad, they never said they loved me or hugged me, but we knew they loved us because of they provided for us. It's just that I guess the culture and the time, they were not openly affectionate." So I said, "Okay, let's make a pact. If we have kids, let's always tell them we love them and always hug them. And she said, okay, good. So we agreed on that. And God blessed us with 2 sons. And we always told them we loved them. We always hugged them. And to this day, they're really loving. They hug us when they see us. They always say, I love you, Dad, Mom. And they turn out really good in their respective fields. They married Christian wives from Christian families. And I am blessed. You know, it's just amazing how God works. That leads to another ministry that I started by myself. Danette's father, in 1995, so 30 years ago, he developed multiple myeloma cancer, and he was given 2 years to live. He ended up in the rehabilitation hospital. And I remember visiting him on Thanksgiving Day, and it was really quiet. There was no music. All the patients were sitting in wheelchairs and just quiet, just by themselves. And I said, oh, this is not right. We got to cheer them up. So I met the director of the hospital, and I said, you know, Christmas time, I can come back with my keyboard, and I can sing some Christmas caroling on Christmas Day. And she said, great, that's a good idea. So I said, great, I'll come on Christmas Day. What time's a good time? She said, about 9:30 in the morning. I said, great, okay. So that first year was the first, 30 years ago, was the first time we started this Christmas caroling ministry. So it just had me on the keyboards, and Danette, my 2 boys, a couple singers from my office, and a couple of her friends, maybe eight people in total. And we sang. It was really a blessing. And in fact, the director was so excited. She actually didn't tell me, but she called a reporter that came over. It was Hawaii News Now, and they actually filmed us playing, and they interviewed me. So I had like 15 seconds of fame on the news. Asked me why I do this and stuff. So that was neat. And so from that, I knew that was from God too, because every year we'd be doing the Christmas caroling. And it taught the boys a lesson too. When you're young, you want to open your presents on Christmas Day, but we told them, no, let's go first to the hospital. We'll play, we'll bless other people first, and then we can come back home and open our gifts. And so that was a good lesson for all of us. So I've been playing for 30 straight years, except a couple of years during the COVID time, which reminds me, this coming Christmas, they booked us again, Kaneohe Plaza. I know a lot of you join us. The last Thursday before Christmas, so it's December 18th, 6:30 p.m. We're going to be singing at the Kaneohe Plaza. And they love us over there. They book us right after we sing. They put me on the calendar already. They want us to come back. But I just heard that Nathan and Helen won't be there, so we'll see. But I'd like for you all to join me if you can this coming Christmas for more caroling. Now, this leads me to where I am right now, where I developed cancer. And God prepared me for this time by giving me peace. So I was not in shock when I first heard the news that I had cancer. I was pretty calm, and I said, okay, I know God will get me through this. Of course, I would pray, God, please take it away from me. But He didn't, and He allowed me to experience all these tests and all these treatments for a reason. And then it dawned on me toward the end of my radiation treatments, I said, okay, God wanted me to go through all this so that I can help somebody else in the future that may have the same problem I have. And I said, I'll be willing to share my experiences with that person. And that same week, you're not going to believe this, but Daryl walks up to me and says, I know somebody who just was diagnosed with this prostate cancer, and he heard about my problem, and he wanted to talk to me. So I said, okay, I'll meet him. So I met him last week, and we had a good talk, and he asked me all kind of questions. I shared what I went through, and because I know I went through all of these things, I could answer his questions and offer some avenues that he might take, because there's different options to take on treatment. And so he was very appreciative, and I felt blessed because I'm putting this to use, and I would never be able to do this if I didn't go through this myself. So now I know I could help minister to other people. So all in all, God did all the work, and I just had to be available. I had to just recognize his will and call, and then have that faith to obey and call to action and do something to get involved. And the benefit for me was there was a satisfaction and a fulfillment and a joy that it's just from God. It's just all I can say, no matter what the circumstances. And the result for God is that he is glorified through all this. There was a weak vessel he used to glorify himself. So I'll leave you with this final verse. Ephesians 2:10. For we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good work, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Thank you.